Everyone, welcome into the 5 minute morning devotion today. I'm so thankful that you chose to join me, and I pray that this episode of the devotion is a blessing to you. We are continuing through the week of Jesus' Passion. We are at Friday, and um, yesterday we discussed the Passover in minimal detail because we tried to fit just a timeline in the 5 minute devotion, and then the Garden of Gethsemane. And so we were up to the point where Jesus was about to be handed over or betrayed by Judas and handed over to the Sanhedrin. And so he is betrayed and is arrested after Judas betrays him. It is somewhere after midnight. And then Jesus goes on trial. He goes before Annas and Caiaphas, and he goes before part of the Sanhedrin during the wee hours of the morning, and then before the full Sanhedrin sometime around sunrise or maybe a little after. And so they're debating, trying to figure out what to do with him. And after it was a real interrogation, but false pretense, and say that he blasphemed by saying he was the Son of God. And so because of this, after this, he is sent to the Romans for trial. He goes before Pilate, then before Herod, then before Pilate again. So there's this back and forth, and he is sent to be scourged. He receives 39 stripes, a brutal beating. They mocked him. They platted a crown of thorns upon his head. His body, the inwards of his body were exposed in certain areas. He was brutally beaten, mocked and ridiculed. And then finally, he is convicted. He's convicted to death by hanging on a tree. And so his mutilated body, after he had been spit upon, beaten with the whip, beaten with fist, put a crown of thorns upon his head that pierced through his skull and scalp. After all of this, he was a bloody mess. It was just a gruesome sight. After this, he is charged with carrying his cross up to the place called the skull, or Golgotha. And so his weakened body carries this cross up the hill to Golgotha's hill. He's carrying his cross, and under immense excruciating pain and weakness, he collapses under his cross. And then in Mark 15, verse 21, the Bible says, "And they compelled a passerby, Simon of Cyrene, who was coming in from the country, the father of Alexander and Rufus, to carry his cross." So Simon the Cyrene picks his cross up and carries it with him. The Bible says, "And they brought him to the place called Golgotha," which means the place of the skull. "And they offered him wine mixed with myrrh, but he didn't take it. And they crucified him, and divided his garments among them, casting lots for them to decide what each should take. And it was the third hour when they crucified him. And the inscription of the charge against him read, 'The King of the Jews.' And with him they crucified two robbers, one on the right and one on the left. And those who passed by derided him, wagging their heads and saying, 'Aha, you who would destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days, save yourself. Come down from that cross.' So also the chief priests with the scribes mocked him to one another, saying, 'He saved others. He cannot save himself. Let the Christ, the King of Israel, come down now from the cross, that we may see and believe.' Those who were crucified with him also reviled him. And then when it was the 6th hour had come, there was darkness over the whole land until the 9th hour. And at the 9th hour Jesus cried with a loud voice, 'Eloi, Eloi, lema sabachthani,' which means, 'My God, why have you forsaken me?' And some of the bystanders hearing it said, 'Behold, he is calling Elijah.' And some ran and filled a sponge with sour wine and put it to the reed and gave it to him to drink, saying, 'Wait, let us see whether Elijah will come take him down.' And Jesus uttered a loud cry and breathed his last breath. And the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. When the centurion who stood facing him saw that in this way he breathed his last, he said, "Truly, this man was the Son of God." So now we see this crucifixion. We see him in agony. And so Jesus passes. He gives up the ghost, as we read, and he dies. And so they go do their rounds, and they are going to take them off the cross because of the Jewish holiday and feast. They wanted them down to bury them. And so they pierced his side, and he died, pierced his side. And Joseph of Arimathea requested the body. He buried him in a tomb, and they laid Jesus in a tomb all on this Friday. He passes somewhere between 9 in the morning and 3 in the afternoon. So in between those times is where the crucifixion, this story is displayed. And then he is buried that evening. And so he's laid in a tomb on that Friday. His body is laid in a tomb, and it seems hopeless and seems like he has been defeated. But I've got good news. I read the full story. And the disciples and those that were with him that day, they didn't get the full story. But I read the full story. And the full story tells me it may be dark on Friday, but Sunday is on its way.